And what do you see on your screen?
See the logo and the three of us on the side.
Yes.
Okay, we're live on YouTube. So we can start letting people in, I guess, and I will stop sharing in a minute.
All right, I'm going to start letting people in.
Okay.
I would rather he turned around and asked you than got up and asked.
Listen, yeah. Oh, and thank you for your comments at the executive meeting. That was great.
Just a reminder to everybody to mute yourself. I know I forget sometimes, but we can hear you. Unless you want us to hear your conversations, and that's okay too.
Yeah. So I'm glad to see some of my suggestions were considered, like, sending them comments.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Sorry. Okay. Well, we'll talk.
Welcome,
Hello,
everybody. Welcome.
Hello.
Hello.
So happy April 1st, everybody. At least it's afternoon. It's not April Fool's Day anymore, really, because I guess we get enough April Fools with the COVID policy announcements.
Morning, Susan. Good evening.
Hi, Bill. How are you doing?
Not too bad. Hibernating almost.
Well, it's lovely because the sun is staying up longer.
Yes, I went outside. It's very cold right now outside.
John, I can post the agenda in the chat, and I'll do that a few times as more people join us.
Great, welcome everyone. We'll be starting in just a moment. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at the material that was sent out to you as delegates, the agenda, which is also being put in the chat now, the statements that we're having, and the minutes from the previous meeting. Two days ago at this time, all the lights went off in this building, and we were wondering if they hadn't paid their electricity bill. But it turned out the entire area was shut down with power. And poor Maureen came in at 7 o'clock yesterday morning to do a mailing. And the building was shut down. All the electronic locks meant that nobody could come in, let alone that the computers could work. So we'll come back in today at 7 o'clock in the morning. That's the kind of amazing staff we have. It doesn't matter if the power is on or off, they're still going to get the job done. So we're going to ask everybody to mute themselves, please, if you're unmuted. And in a moment, as people come on, we'll be checking the roll call of officers. Just a reminder that as we speak to the statements or the reports of unions, it's only delegates that are invited to speak to those. Lots of people are welcome to be watching this, but it's only for delegates to do reports or to speak to statements other than invited guests. And I see we have an invited guest with us, Faye Faraday, who's going to speak in a minute on the Equal Pay Day. So good evening, sisters and brothers. We're going to start with Jennifer reading the harassment statement.
Mutual respect, cooperation, and understanding are strongly held principles of the trade union movement. We will neither condone nor tolerate harassing or discriminatory behavior that creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive environment and undermines the dignity or self-esteem of any individual. An injury to one is an injury to all. Speech or conduct which is racist, sexist, homophobic, or discriminatory in any way is unacceptable to trade unionists and only serves to divide us. Our policies and practices must reflect this commitment to equality as we work together for justice and dignity in our workplaces, our unions, and our communities.
Thanks, Jennifer. For those of you who were able to join us a week ago at the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, you will have heard a very, very powerful greeting from Kylie May, who's an Indigenous activist and actor, very involved in her own union around equity rights. And she reminded us that when we do a land acknowledgement, it's much more than simply reading out a statement. It's about thinking about our relationship to the First Peoples on this land, the reality of the experience, and the impact of colonialism and the ongoing work we must do. So I'm going to read this, but I want to do it in that spirit. We're meeting on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the New Credit. And that was subject to the Dish with One Spoon Treaty between the Anishinaabe, the Mississaugas, and the Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the treaty and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans, and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. And we would ask, if you've never taken a look at the Truth and Reconciliation report, that was a very, very powerful document. It's something that we should all be looking at and thinking about, the truths that are brought to bear with that report. Susan's going to describe the Zoom process for those of you who may not be familiar with Zoom. So Susan.
Yeah, and most of you are old hands at this, but just a reminder of the basic Zoom practices. We do ask you to keep yourself muted so that we reduce the background noise, and then at the point at which you're invited to speak, you can unmute yourself. Please feel free to make use of the chat function respectfully to make sure that you're commenting and not distracting people from speakers and presentations and videos. When it comes time to ask questions, I think everybody here is here online. And we would ask you to use the little blue raise hand function, which is either found by opening up the participant list and looking at the bottom of the participant panel, and you'll see something that says raise hand. Or for some people, it can be found in the reaction section, which is along the bottom of your Zoom screen. If there is anybody on the phone and I've missed that, you can raise your hand by pressing *9. I think that's about it. Have a good rest of the meeting. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Are there any first-time delegates? If there are, can you raise your hands? And that's the blue hand on the participant list, or raising hand under the reactions function. Waikiat, can you introduce yourself? And we'll see us Joe from Partners. Can you introduce yourself? Just tell us about your union and who you are, and unmute. Yep.
My name is Waikiki Tang. I'm a member of the Carpenters Union, Local 27.
Great. Melissa Joe.
Hi, my name is Melissa Joe. I go by MJ because that's so much easier for everyone. Carpenter Local 27.
Welcome, MJ. Darren, followed by Rocky. Darren?
Hey, yeah, I'm Darren. I'm with Local 4891. We're Regeneration Community Services. It's like social workers.
Great, thank you. Rakaya? You got to unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Hi, everyone. My name is Rakaya Gay. People call me Rock, and I am from Local 27, Carpenters Union.
Great, thank you. And Liam's got his hand up as if he's a new member. Ha.
Hi, my name is April, last name Fools. Local got you. Thanks.
Aha. Okay.
Very funny.
There's got to be somebody in the room. Great. Do we have the credential? No. So first of all, the minutes have been sent out, and we're assuming there's a motion to accept those minutes. Are there any errors or omissions that anybody has caught in those minutes? And if not, then we'll put up the vote on the screen for people to vote. That also gives you a practice for how we're voting for the statements a little later on. Now, I'm also looking, while we're doing that, for Bill Devine. Brother Bill Devine is 91 years of age, and he's supposed to be joining us by telephone. And maybe Helen or John, you could just give him a call and make sure he's got the right information to be able to get in by phone, because I don't see him there. Oh, maybe that's him. I
see a telephone here with a phone number on the bottom.
Okay, that might be him. Okay, the minutes, we're going to that. Is there a credential report while waiting for the vote on the minutes?
Yes, there is. I move acceptance of 5 delegates from the Canadian Media Guild and 1 delegate from the York University Staffs Association.
Great. So that's a motion. Again, we'll go to the votes. And while we're doing that, yeah, I'll just say Bill is on the phone. Bill Devine, I first met Bill when he was working at CCM in Weston, when Mount Dennis Weston was an industrial powerhouse of the city. When that place closed down, he moved to Scarborough and became working at the Scarborough van plant on Eglinton Avenue, part of the leadership of Local 303 CAW. And he became one of the experts of our movement to talk about how we protect employment land and industrial land. And Bill presented a number of times, to city governments about the crucial reality of protecting employment lands. And Bill turned 91 yesterday. So you can't see us, but it would be great if everybody waved their hand and welcome Bill. Thank you for joining us. Okay, and that's the credential motion that's there. And while people are voting on that, I'm just going to say that our last month we had the Brother Gaurav Sharma from the Brewery Workers Local 325 come and speak about the lockout of their members up at Molson's. They're not able to be with us tonight. They're in bargaining again, but just they really want to send their thanks to everybody who's come out to their line, to all of the organizations, individuals have come to support them, provide that support. Local 113 came out with their vehicle last weekend, and other folks have done that. So he just wanted to really pass on the warm thank you for all the solidarity that that group of workers have experienced. So that motion is passed. You know, we just saw today the announcement provincially that we are going to go into a new level of lockdown because of COVID. We have been informed of a number of union members who have passed in recently because of COVID. Of course, there's many, you know, Canadians who are stricken by this, but we want to observe a minute's silence for Lativia Spike and Jaya Devine, Saba Pithapalai of UFCW 1006A, Alex Setokovich, I'm sorry, of the Steelworkers 5338, and Joe Biazzi of IBW 353. And Joe asked, his wife asked that a picture be put in their newsletter 353, asking people, please wear your mask and get tested. So in their memory and all those others who've lost their lives, could we please observe a minute's silence? Thank you. And we're going to ask people to mute if you're not one of the speakers. So I'm going to introduce Sister Kim Mantaluk from QP 2484 and member of our Women's Committee to introduce our speaker on Equal Pay Day. Kim.
Great, thanks, John. At last month's delegates meeting, we heard that the first women delegates to our Labor Council were on strike over equal pay. So this month, we will hear from Faye Faraday about Equal Pay Day and the exciting plans that Equal Pay Coalition has for us on April 7th. Faye is a labor and human rights lawyer and founder of Faraday Law. She has represented unions, community organizations, and social movements in labor, human rights, charter rights, and pay equity for over 25 years. She has argued many leading charter and human rights cases at the Supreme Court of Canada. She also works as a community organizer with migrant worker movements and is the co-chair of the Equal Pay Coalition. I will now turn it over to Faye to share a little bit more about how we can demand better this Equal Pay Day and how women's paid and unpaid work, lives, and equality are always essential.
Thank you very much, Kim, for inviting me. And thank you to all of you for making the space for the Equal Pay Coalition to let you know what our campaign is about. The labor movement has always been a big part of the coalition and has always been a big supporter of Equal Pay Day and other activities to promote women's economic justice. So Equal Pay Day is coming up on Wednesday, April 7th. And it's always held in April because it signifies how far into the new year women need to work on average to make what men did by December 31st. So women have to work on average 15 and a half months to make what men did in 12. And but of course the gender pay gap isn't distributed equally. There's a significant disparate burden based on different forms of sorry, I'm just trying to get my slide up here, on different forms of inequality. And so we've been really highlighting the fact that women with disabilities experience the greatest gender pay gap. So a 56.5% pay gap, which works out to getting 44 cents on the dollar. Immigrant women have a 55% pay gap, Indigenous women 45%, racialized women 40%, and overall the average is 32%. Yesterday was, of course, the Day of Visibility for trans people, and the gender pay gap affects trans and non-binary people in a very significant way as well. As you can see, there's a significant suppression of earnings, loss of jobs, and in addition to discrimination on the basis of trans and non-binary identification, they are also hit by the gender pay gap. And what we were highlighting today on April Fool's Day is that at the current rate that the wage gap is closing, in Canada, it will take 164 years to close the pay gap. And that's what things were like before the pandemic. The pandemic has, as you will have heard all year, had a disproportionate impact on women. Women are predominating in many of the high-risk jobs on the front line where people have not been able to physically distance in their jobs. So in care, in all the different forms of care work, and retail and warehousing, but they've also lost jobs disproportionately because of the female-dominated industries that have shut down, like tourism, accommodations, airlines, and so on, arts and culture. And as the economy has opened and closed and opened and closed, women have benefited less from the economic recovery that has occurred, largely because of a lack of accessible childcare and the need to take on the additional burden of work when schools are closed, when there's additional care work to be done in families. And so what we're seeing is a real exacerbation, aggravation of all that economic inequality that existed before the pandemic. And it raises real concerns about what is going to happen. There have been so many women who've left the workforce because of their additional unpaid care obligations that the number of women who are currently in the labor force is the lowest it's been since the 1980s. So that's a loss of 2 whole generations of economic gains for women in the labor market. And unless the recovery from the pandemic has a very deliberate, intentional, intersectional, gendered lens to it, then women are going to be left behind, not just immediately after the pandemic, but it will take generations to catch up. There's some real risks, just at the personal, the individual level, of women going back after they've been out of the workforce. They're going to be going into a way of work that has been transformed during the pandemic. Will they need to be starting at a lower level than they left? As there are shifts in how work is done after the pandemic and women aren't there to shape it, are they again going to be left behind because what's been developed doesn't respond to dismantling all those structures that prevent women from participating fully in the economy? What we're doing this Equal Pay Day is really focusing on all of the different ways in which women have been harmed by the pandemic, and harmed in a a way that brings to light the intersectional impacts, the fact that it is racialized women and low wage workers who are suffering the most, women on the front lines in care work and so on. But we want to hold governments to account to ensure that their recovery plans do have a deliberate intersectional feminist lens on them. Because if we go back to doing what has traditionally been done, putting money into physical infrastructure, that's not, that's not going to help all the women in the sphere of social infrastructure who have been most strongly hurt. So what we're doing on Equal Pay Day is we will be sending out new videos. We'll be launching new videos about every 15 to 20 minutes throughout the day with women from the front lines talking about how the pandemic has affected them. You'll be hearing from women who have lost their positions, who have had COVID, who have taken on care responsibilities, who've faced risk at work. And each of them will be making their own demands for what they need in the recovery. And just to give you a taste of that, I will play a very short video. They're all less than a minute. So if I can just play this one, I hope it will help encourage you to participate, to share, to amplify the message, and to encourage your members to respond with videos of their own about what it is they need on Equal Pay Day. Our hashtags are Demand Better, because as you've seen from the budget, it has not done much to boost from the bottom up, and to assert that our rights are always essential. So Demand Better and Always Essential are the hashtags that we're going with this year. And so I just want to share this video with you, which is from the Ontario Coalition for Better Childcare. And I'll make sure I've got my volume up for you. Here we go.
Hi everyone, my name is Lima Chavez and I'm a mother to a 4-year-old who is smart, silly, funny, and kind. My work as a peer coach is essential because I provide resources and supports to college students that focus on well-being, inclusion, and food security. Without childcare, I wouldn't be able to do this work. Frankly, there's a lot of things that I wouldn't be able to do without childcare. Childcare has not only made it possible for me as a young single mother to work a part-time job, but it's also given me the opportunity to pursue a degree in early childhood leadership. Childcare has given me the ability to work and provide and work towards creating a life that both myself and my son deserve. Care work makes all of their work possible, and public funding for a universal childcare system is essential for a fair and just recovery for mothers, children, and families. On this Equal Pay Day, join me to demand better. Hi everyone, my name is Lima Chavez.
Sorry,
and I'm
let
a
me
mother to a
just
4-year-old who
stop
is
that.
smart, silly, funny, and
So as you'll see with each of the videos, we're highlighting a different element of what we need to demand to ensure that we have an economic recovery that leaves no one behind. And the call out at the end of each video is to call Doug Ford's office. We've got his number there, and to echo the demands that the women are making. So we hope that you will join in, you'll amplify the videos, feel free to add your own, and feel free to get on the phones and jam those lines. Thank you so much for including me tonight.
Thank you, Faye, and thank you for our Women's Committee for inviting Faye, for being very, very strong supporters, for everybody who marches every year on International Women's Day, holding those signs about equal pay. And please urge people to, it'll be out in our e-blast to remind you how to support this campaign. So thanks again, Faye, for coming with us tonight. Our next item is this Sunday is Refugee Rights Day. We've got somebody who needs to mute their phone. This Sunday is Refugee Rights Day. Am I?
We can hear you.
Okay, good. Thank you. This Sunday is Refugee Rights Day, and it's an issue which this Labour Council has paid a lot of attention to, and we know that the politics of hate and division, some of it which previous Conservative federal government were whipping up against people who came from elsewhere, and of course, which Mr. Trump was very much part of, is about changing the narrative on who refugees are. Well, we do have a number of refugees in our own leadership of our labor movement here in Toronto. Abdi Hagi Youssef on our board, Miguel Lima are on our board, and our amazing leader of our Labor Community Services, which is our partnership with United Way, Faduma Mohammed. So I'm going to turn it over to Faduma as she introduces what I'm going to see next. Faduma.
Okay, thank you, John. Good evening, sisters and brothers. Since the launch of the Refugee Next Door campaign in 2019 by Labour Community Service and Toronto and York Region Labour Council, believing it was important to look at refugees coming to Toronto today and what their arrival means for our unions and our community, the Refugee Next Door Advisory Committee was formed and has worked hard to bring refugee issues to the forefront of our movement. As we know, the global pandemic has affected the most vulnerable and racialized groups the hardest. With more than 70 million refugees worldwide, it's a number that we can't afford to ignore and is a human rights issue we need to continue standing up for. This presentation focuses on refugees in Canada, highlights facts and dispelling myths about refugee and the refugee experience. It's a tool that's easily accessible and shared and will be shown at this year's CLC online convention. We welcome you to get in contact with Sharon Simpson for any question, or if you would like us to help you facilitate a presentation with your members. To reach Sharon, please email her at simpson@laborcommunityservice.ca, and I will put that now in the chat so you can contact us. Thank you.
This presentation focuses on refugees in Canada and separates facts from myths. It builds on the Refugee Next Door campaign launched by Labour Community Services and Toronto and York Region Labour Council. By highlighting facts while dispelling myths about refugees and the refugee experience, we hope that everyone will find the presentation a useful tool in understanding and standing up for human rights. According to UNHCR, at least 70 million people around the world have been forced to flee their homes. In a world where one person is forcibly displaced roughly every 2 seconds as a result of conflicts or persecution, our work is more important than ever before. In this presentation, we will try and answer questions, separate myths from facts, explore who benefits and loses from the debate on refugees, and finally, we will make some suggestions on what you can do. The big questions. Who is a refugee? A refugee is a person who has been forced to leave their country in order to escape war, persecution, natural or economic disasters. Situations across the globe have contributed to the global refugee crisis. Globally, we see political refugees, people who are forced to flee their homeland because of their political opinion or because of political unrest. Economic refugees, people who flee their homeland in search of a better life for their children and themselves. Climate refugees, people who are forced to flee due to sudden or gradual alterations in the natural environment related to the impact of climate change. Can we pretend that it is not happening? Do we have a responsibility to respond? We must respond. Our common humanity and respect for human rights dictates that we do. Watch this UNHCR video.
When the numbers get too big, it's time to focus on the people. Every life matters. It's only when we see the individual families and children without homes, jobs, schools, that we can really fathom how much is at stake.
أنا حابب كمل دراستي واطلع رائد فضاء يعني مشان شوف الكواكب كلياتها نكمل الفضاء وهذا الشيء ما راح يمنعنا بنوب.
The sheer scale of the current crises around the world demands that we find a better way to help. It requires new ideas and new approaches, working side by side to deliver for refugees and bring communities together. And it requires tenacity. Faced with more complex refugee emergencies, countries with the least means still host the greatest numbers of uprooted families, and sometimes for decades. A more holistic and comprehensive approach is being tested, in which all parts of society have roles and responsibilities. In Uganda, the country that has hosted millions of uprooted families, refugees are offered land to farm and the right to work. In Iran, refugees can access training programs and can go to school. In Central America, to address the growing displacement, countries are employing a region-wide approach to ensure that no nation is alone in finding solutions. Elsewhere, there are inspiring examples, big and small, of how to make a difference. Against the odds, there are thousands of refugees creating their own success stories. People in towns and cities around the world have realized the potential that refugees can offer. Through innovation and creativity, grassroots efforts are supporting entire communities, not just the refugees who live there. When our common humanity prevails, solutions are no longer elusive. We can find the means to create a more just and effective way to resolve the refugee crisis and, at the same time, improve the societies which welcome them. All of this demonstrating that when we stand with refugees, we also stand for respect and dignity for all people. We have a historic opportunity.
Canada has a proud history of welcoming refugees and have done so for several centuries. People who have sought and are seeking refuge are leaving countries that have been devastated by policies imposed by global forces. Structural adjustment programs, extreme resource extraction, political repression, proxy wars, and climate change have forced tens of millions from their homes, 70 million according to UNHCR. Seeking refuge from harm is a basic human right. Canada has accepted refugees from all corners of the globe, including Latin America, Africa, Asia, and Europe. Refugees have made Canada stronger, economically and morally. Children continue to be in immigration detention or separated from a parent because of detention. The Safe Third Country Agreement between Canada and the United States of America makes it possible for each to declare the other country safe for refugees and close their doors on most refugee claimants at the U.S.-Canada border. Canada's federal court has ruled that sending refugee claimants back to the USA under the Safe Third Country Agreement violates their right to liberty and security under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. However, this decision will only take effect on January 22, 2021. Arbitrary detention continues to be practiced. These concerns must be addressed. Canada benefits from the contribution of refugees. Refugees have contributed to every sector of Canada's economy, including literature, the labor movement, politics, and the arts. Kim Thuy is an award-winning author and a refugee. Miguel Lima is a labor activist and a refugee. Mariam Monsef is a cabinet minister and a refugee. Kainan is a poet, a musician, and a refugee. You may remember his song, "When I get older, I will be stronger. They'll call me freedom, just like a waving flag." And there are so many others. Yet myths about refugees persist. These myths fuel ideas of prejudice, mistrust, and the alienation of refugees. Some common myths include crime. In just about every country, immigrants are less likely to commit crimes than the people who were there before them. Security. Refugee claimants go through a front-end security screening. Through this process, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, CSIS, checks all refugee claimants on arrival in Canada. Since the screening was put in place in 2001, the number of claimants found to represent any kind of security concern has been statistically insignificant. Dependency. Refugees who are actually employed have incomes on par with economic immigrants, very much contradicting the notion that refugees act as a drain for taxpayers and the economy. Social assistance. Refugee claimants and refugees recognized by the Immigration and Refugee Board receive no special income assistance. Healthcare. The cost of healthcare for refugees and refugee claimants amounts to just 10% of that of other Canadians. Jumping the queue. Refugees are often accused of not waiting line and jumping the queue. International law guarantees to people fleeing persecution the right to go to another country and seek asylum. If your life is in danger, you run. You don't stand still and wait for help to come to you. Too many refugees. Canada has just about 4 refugees per 1,000 population, compared to more than 20 refugees per 1,000 in many other countries. Turkey is home to 12 times as many refugees as Canada. Canada hosts only about 1% of the world's refugees. Myths are the foundation that anti-refugee rhetoric is built on. Anti-refugee rhetoric is hateful and focused on promoting division. It promotes false news designed to fuel anti-refugee sentiments. It stirs up fear by using technology to raise anxiety levels among the public. Most devastatingly, it fans the flames of racism. So, what's the response? As a labor movement, we must question who benefits from the demonization of refugees. It is not a coincidence that the people who want to put a wedge between us based on fear and ignorance are often those who oppose workers' rights, union security, and strong employment standards. The promotion of hate and fear of refugees is used to divide us as workers and as communities. As union activists, we must challenge harmful rhetoric and dispel myths about migrants and refugees. We must also recognize who loses from the demonization of refugees. The simple answer is, we all lose. Workers who are divided are weakened, and we lose the strength that comes from solidarity and collective action. Workers become distracted from their real adversaries and real issues. So, what can you do? To take positive action, you can read the Refugees Next Door brochure and share it with union members. Find out facts about refugees and share those with your family, workmates, friends, and neighbors. Connect with an organization serving refugees, such as the Canadian Council for Refugees, the Ontario Council of Agencies Serving Immigrants, the FCJ Refugee Centre. Invite us to make a presentation at your next union meeting or event, and most of all, don't be a bystander, especially online. For more information, please contact us by sending an email to Sharon Simpson at ssimpson@laborcommunityservices.ca. We would like to acknowledge the hard work and dedication of the Refugee Next Door Committee in putting together this presentation, and say thank you to Cara Ricketts for her narration. And on behalf of the Refugee Next Door Advisory Committee, the Toronto and York Region Labour Council, and Labour Community Services, Thank you for listening. We appreciate the time you took to listen to the presentation, and we look forward to continue working with you. For more information, please visit our website, laborcommunityservices.ca and laborcouncil.ca.
Isn't that a wonderful video? You can have that presentation come to any of your meetings, your stewards meetings, your executive board, your membership. Just reach out to Faduma or Sharon Simpson. We put up Faduma's put up Sharon's information on the line. You know, our labor movement has a lot of history of supporting individual refugees. Many of our unions supported Syrian refugees. Some of you may not know that about 15 years ago, our labor council formally supported a refugee to this country from Colombia. Her name was Sandra Cordero. She was the head of the telephone workers union. And when the government wanted to privatize the telephone works, she was threatened. The death squads killed the lawyer that worked for the union and sent her a note saying, "You're next." This labor council endorsed her. And when you see our bus ads around the 150th anniversary, you're going to see a picture of her son at Labor Day, just a couple years after she came to this country, with a beautiful sign that says hope. That's the kind of spirit which we bring into this conversation. And Faduma, I want to thank you and the Labor Community Services for your leadership and for everybody on the Refugee Rights, Refugee Next Door campaign. So please, sisters, brothers, friends, invite Labor Community Services to bring that presentation to a meeting of yours sometime soon. That brings us to the next item, which is a statement on dismantling anti-Asian racism. Some of you may see on my lapel pin here is an image of the Chinese Workers' Railway Monument that's down on Front and Spadina. That was built many years ago. The Canadian Pacific Railway was celebrating 100 years since the founding and connecting this country coast to coast to coast. And they had a picture of the Lord with his top hat banging in the last spike, and Pierre Burton wrote a book about that. The Chinese Canadians said, wait a minute, that railway would never have been possible if it wasn't for 17,000 migrant workers that came from Guangdong to build that railway. And in the Rockies, almost 4,000 were killed or injured in making this country possible, because without the railway, British Columbia would not have been part of Canada. We held, during SARS, when people were running away from anybody that looked Asian and streetcars were emptying, we held our day of mourning ceremony at that monument to remind all of us that without the efforts of Chinese Canadians and others, this country wouldn't be possible. And sadly, we've seen an increase, dramatic increase in what's happening around hate and distrust of all Asian people. So we have a statement in front of us, Dismantle Anti-Asian Racism. And I know there's a couple of people to speak on it. So if you would raise your hands, and I've got to make sure I'm looking at this right. No. Jennifer, you've got somebody that's speaking on this, I believe.
Is Kingsley here, or he and I think Lily both had wanted to have us write a statement on this, but I don't see Kingsley. Lily, did you want to speak on it? I don't want to put you off the cuff like that.
Sure, I'll speak off the cuff. Thank you. I do appreciate, thank you very much for the statement. And I do remember at the time we were talking about this, you know, I've been in Canada since I was 2 years old, not too long ago, but, you know, I speak like, you know, people when they hear me speak, they don't normally think that I, you know, was not born here. But seeing the events around the world, and it brings home a lot of, you know, a lot of worries, a lot of anxieties. I'm actually feeling myself choking up right now. Not really expecting this, but I think there's a lot of hurt that comes out when you see these kinds of images around the world. And I really do appreciate the statement. And I thank everybody who supports anybody who faces discrimination and hatred around the world. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Lily. I see David Kidd. David?
Lily, I'm really feeling for you with that, and thank you for contributing. I worked downtown Toronto during the SARS epidemic as a community worker, and it was the last racist fight I had to break up. I came into a schoolyard and 5 kids were throwing stones at a Chinese kid and blaming him for the outbreak of SARS. And we had to engage the community in a conversation about SARS during that time to stop this. I just want to say one quick historical reference. There are people that still try to refer to the 1918 flu as the Spanish flu. And that indenture was made because Spain didn't go into World War I, and France and Germany and England were angry at them for not participating. And so they named it that. And it would be like we called the current pandemic the Chinese flu. And it does spur some people to unreasonable lengths in terms of when at the same time we have a premier who is completely out of his depth in dealing with the pandemic around us. So I really, really appreciate, because this is what we're dealing with. It's a global pandemic, and we need to remind everybody that that is what this is about. And it's really unfortunate that so many Asians have had to deal with the brunt of this. And the only thing I want to say to delegates, because one thing I do know, and I remember, I'm a retiree now, I was an elected leader in my union, but what I do remember is that people who are subjected to this kind of discrimination and racism, it may not just happen in the workplace. It could be when they go shopping on the weekend. And all I would ask is that you reach out to the brothers and sisters in your union and ask them what they've been through. This is the time where we need to stand together, because the one thing the labor movement has always taught me, and the slogan that resounds so strongly, is an injury to one is an injury to all. And I really appreciate the Labor Council for putting together this statement. And I'm with you on solidly on this, Lily.
Thank you. I've got Abdi, then Laura, then Carolyn. Abdi?
Sisters and brothers, comrades, good evening. Tonight's an emotional night, actually. John, you put back to back three topics that we as a labor has to tackle. We hear about the women's issue and pay equity. We hear about the refugee, and now this topic, discrimination against the Asian. This was a word that Trump started when COVID started. It was a word that Trump actually from USA media that focused, instead of focusing how to tackle the pandemic, he called it the China virus. Unfortunately, and I will say unfortunately, we did not speak enough how to defend or how to help the Asians. People start boycotting their stores. People start not going to their restaurants, even before it was a widespread COVID. And it spread like a wildfire. The media didn't focus it, but the Asian people, the people from Asia, all suffered as a families. And what the Asian people, majority of them different from other communities, that they are not most of the time focused on the streets. They suffer a lot. So it's about time that we give a voice. It's about time to stand up with Asians, because what they are going through today as a families, it's not fair, it's not right. And the labor is the one that stands up and gives voice. So what we can do, it's not only a statement, and it's not only the 100 people participating tonight. When you are at the malls, at the community centers, at the worships, when you can get a microphone to educate or advocate, please say something, because it is such an important issue that we stand up with all of us, with Asian women and children. If you watch the video for the refugee, the people, most of them suffer is the women and children. And here, the women and children. So thank you, sisters and brothers.
Thank you. Laura, followed by Carolyn.
Thank you. Hi, Laura Thompson, OPSU Local 503. My pronouns are she, her. So I certainly speak in favor of this motion for all the reasons that have been stated. Certainly, I think in terms of, and certainly before, and certainly as mentioned in the statement itself, anti-Asian racism has been with us for generations and generations, certainly. And it is certainly for the work of the labor movement to work towards ending anti-Asian racism, anti-Black racism, and anti-Indigenous racism, and white supremacy, and dismantling white supremacy. In terms of this conversation, certainly we've framed it in the context of COVID. And while I don't want to define this conversation by what happened in Atlanta, because I recognize that that is an example, but it's not all of the struggle when it comes to anti-Asian racism and dismantling anti-Asian racism. It is part of the reason as to why this conversation has come to the forefront. And we also need to recognize that as trade unionists that 8 people were murdered on the job directly as a result of anti-Asian racism. And that does need to be recognized in some capacity. Looking at the statement, I mean, again, going back to what happened in Atlanta, and again, I recognize that Atlanta is not everything. It's just one example of what is a systemic, a huge systemic issue that oppresses so many people. And as we've seen, Atlanta puts a lot of people's lives at risk. And certainly that came into the workplace. So certainly I think it is certainly important to recognize on the day of mourning those the direct impact COVID has had to marginalized communities, and to specifically racialized communities. I also think we need to recognize too the ways in which we need to work to dismantle racism and white supremacy, because that does come into our workplaces, and that can directly relate to the deaths of individuals on the job at work. Also as well, in terms of the conversation around the mention about migrant workers, I think with that as well, we also need to recognize, I certainly don't want to define people by someone who was as horrific and as vile as the perpetrators to what happened in Georgia. But at the same time too, where the root of where that came from and what happened as a result of it, in terms of targeting people that, to be clear, are not understood to be sex workers or migrant sex workers, but the stigma, and also the stigma that specifically Asian women face, specifically Asian massage parlor workers face, because of the way that we marginalize sex workers and migrant sex workers, does need to be recognized. So I think in terms of the mentioning about migrant sex workers, I would encourage us to, with that as well, also recognize it specifically when we talk about migrant workers, recognizing as part of that conversation migrant sex workers, because they are particularly vulnerable in the same ways that domestic sex workers are vulnerable working in a criminalized system when it comes to sex work, but also recognizing that on top of that, they also face the threat of deportation and the threat of exposure to violence, sexual violence, and assault. So I think all of those things do need to be recognized when in terms of the statement itself, which isn't to say, again, I totally agree with the statement. I think I appreciate this being brought forward in this conversation. I think everyone has spoken in favor of it, but I would just make sure we put that lens as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Carolyn, last speaker, and then we'll go to the vote.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think in the same way the murder of George Floyd a year or more ago brought the attention of the world to the anti-Black racism that exists and sparked a huge movement, which brought millions into the streets in North America and around the world as well. And in the same way, I think that the misogynist murders that took place in Atlanta brought that same global focus on the anti-Asian racism that has been percolating, well, we know for centuries, but certainly during this COVID to such a height. And, if you've been watching any TV, particularly in the States, but here as well, the attacks on older Asian women, just vicious attacks on people innocently walking down the streets. It's extraordinary when you see it. And I think the very fact that our city was able in a week or so to pull together a demonstration, a rally, as we saw. I mean, we were there, numbers of us were there from this Labor Council for sure. There were thousands of people, primarily people from Asian backgrounds, but beyond that. And I just want to really congratulate the Chinese Canadian National Council, the Toronto chapter, and the Asian Canadian Labor Alliance, and Butterfly, which is an organization of Asian sex trade workers, who with others were able to pull that together and to get the media that was necessary. And also they reached out to the labor movement. I mean, people that many of us know, like Winnie Ng and Jenny An and Anna Liu, women who were very, very active in the International Women's Committee, in the labor movement for some for many, many years, like Winnie, some for less time, like Anna. They were able to make connections with all the other activists in our city, from the labor movement, from the women's movement, to pull together. And they asked for help from unions like the steelworkers and the elementary teachers and Unifor to come together with groups from their own community, but also from the International Women's Day Committee to provide security, because there were threats that were heard by Asian American organizations that this particular rally, for whatever reason, was going to be targeted. In the end, it was not, but there were hundreds, over 100, I don't know the actual number of marshals who came up from our labor movement and other movements that we work with to provide security, because it was so incredibly important. And I think that the speakers from the Indigenous community, from the Black community, from the labor movement who spoke, showing that solidarity is critical. These are tough times we're in. We're seeing the rise of racism everywhere. I mean, we saw what happened on January 6th. In the United States, and the far right is continuing to divide people one from another, using scapegoating racial or people from different racial backgrounds, trying to pit one against the other. And I think what we saw last weekend at City Hall was an extraordinary point of solidarity that labor had an incredible role in. And I think I just want to commend those organizations that pulled together so quickly, and the leadership that came from often labor women in that particular struggle. So I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention. Thank you.
Thanks, Carolyn. It was a really inspiring rally last Sunday at City Hall, and a lot of labor presence, but great community alliances, as Carolyn has mentioned. So we're going to go to the vote now. And while we're putting up the vote, the recommendations are we call on affiliates to incorporate anti-racism work in every aspect of our union activity, including health and safety work. We urge every union to adopt the Yes It Matters campaign and call on employers to implement extensive workplace anti-racism programs. We want to ensure that Day of Mourning events on April 28th acknowledge the disproportionate impact of the COVID pandemic on workers and communities of color. We're going to call on educational and healthcare institutions to develop strategies and commit resources to dismantle all forms of racism within their operations and services. And lastly, we're going to support community allies leading the struggle for migrant workers, employment standards, and human rights in every aspect of Canadian society. So that is what we're voting on. And as we're waiting for that, we're going to be moving to the statement, the race to the bottom. And again, sometimes thank you very much for that strong support. The next statement is race to the bottom. It's about the TTC outsourcing, and I know Brother Alim is going to speak, and if there's any other speakers, please put up your hands. Brother Alim.
Oh, hi, everybody. The reason why this came about is the TTC is trying to contract out a lot of our semi-skilled workers. So we had brought it up to our executive board, and John had made mention that in, I think, 2012, the Ford government and Chief Julian Fantino at the time had tried to get rid of 800 city worker cleaner jobs. And we had put forward a statement somewhat similar to this, but we really wanted to incorporate a couple of things. So I do have some notes that I just want to refer to. Mm-hmm. So just quickly, the TTC is an advanced stage of contracting out streetcar cleaning vehicle services, which involves the cleaning and pre-servicing of streetcar vehicles. Young workers, women, and applicants from diverse backgrounds have historically used entry-level jobs like this position to gain entry into the commission and take advantage of the TTC's training and tuition support to advance more skilled, higher rated jobs. So not only do women, migrants, racialized, marginalized people use these entry-level positions to get into the TTC, but they then get those jobs. Some of them have some education. Some of them use our tuition aid to get into more skilled or trade jobs. And not only that, but they are also providing not only for their family, but future generations as well. So the TTC does boast about their anti-racist policies, including a new initiative to increase employment from underrepresented groups. But this is hypocritical. The practice of contracting out increases discrimination against women, youth, and BIPOC workers, and excludes the very people that they claim to be supporting. So with that being said, we asked Labor Council to sort of draft up this thing. This statement is not just against contracting out. We want to focus on the bigger picture of access to quality employment. This is a goal shared by unions across the board. This is why we're bringing this issue to Toronto and New York District Region Labor Council. I know that there was something put out by the Financial Accountability Office stating that Ontario has lost, I think, 355,000 jobs, maybe plus, in 2020, causing the province unemployment rate to go up to, I think, 9.6%. And that's the highest it's ever been since 1993. And economists have warned that as many as 270,000 of those jobs may not return. So figures show that these are women, young people, racialized, immigrant workers, low-wage workers, and those with disabilities that have been affected by this, by the pandemic unemployment. So there was something that I really wanted to bring up, and I'll finish off with this. So there was an example of an impact of contracting out, and it was published in the Toronto Star. So it's a Ugandan refugee who went for a temporary contract work job at one of our properties for a company called TBM. So they spray down and sanitize the trains before they go into service. And he was working the graveyard shift, spraying chemicals on the subways for $15.25 an hour. But he developed possible COVID symptoms 2 weeks later after he got the job. The employer then told him to self-isolate. And after 2 weeks on the job, when he returned from self-isolating, they told him that he didn't have a job to come back to. So these are just examples. So I just want to leave it with that, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Other speakers? I thought I saw a hand up. Anybody else to speak on the statement? Okay, if not, we're going to get prepared to vote on that. And the recommendation is the Labor Council work with affiliates to support quality public services at all levels of government, and good jobs that should accompany them, prepare for future contracting out privatization fights. Call on municipal governments in Toronto and New York Region to protect quality public services and jobs as part of the pandemic recovery plans, including an anti-racist and inclusive approach that supports workers. Call on City of Toronto to exercise effective oversight. The TTC Commission should urge management to halt contracting out plans and consider returning currently contracted out work back in-house. And finally, call directly on the TTC and management to abide by the city's pandemic and transit directions. So you've had that in front of you, and the vote's gone up. And while we're waiting to see that vote, and before we go on the 150, I just want to also reference another story of a refugee to this country. He had better luck than the one that Aline talked about. His name was Mahmoud al-Rasul. 5 years ago in the Globe and Mail, there was a story on the first week of January about Mahmoud and his family who'd arrived from Syria as refugees, and their 4 kids and starting their first day of school. And the columnist, Marcus Key, said it's not clear, what's going to happen because he's a construction worker. He's not sure how he's going to make a living or if he make a good living. I reached out to Marcus Key and said, what kind of trade is that person? And can you get us in touch with them? I'm sure we can help out. Well, Mahmoud was a carpenter back in Syria. And we asked Mahmoud and his sponsor to come into our boardroom. Najib Sufyan, who works with Fuduma at the Labour Community Services, speaks, I think, 8 languages, including Arabic. Chris Campbell from the Carpenters came to our boardroom, and we talked to him about his experience. You know, he opened his flip phone and he showed us work that he'd done back home, very complicated forming and carpentry work. And Chris and I looked at each other and said, yep, he's a carpenter. And right away, the Carpenters Union was able to find him a job with Boulevard Forming. That was 5 years ago. Last summer, he was able to purchase and buy a house in Greater Toronto because of the support of our union movement for Mabut. So that's the kind of spirit that our movement exists, and that's why we've got to stand up against good jobs being turned into poverty jobs, because that's no future for anyone. So 150 years, coming up April the 12th is the day. We're going to have a big event on the evening of April 12th. Mohammed Amour is helping us put all that together. And I am gonna turn over for a slideshow or a presentation or PowerPoint that Mohammed is gonna provide to us. There we are, Mohammed.
Thank you, John. 1 second, everybody. Can everybody see the screen okay? So we're really excited to have the launch of our Labor 150 campaign this 2 Mondays from now, on Monday, April 12th. As you all know, it's going to be the celebration of the 150 years of Toronto Labour Council history. And the big part of the project through the next 12 months is going to be the Labor 150 website, which has been put together by Campaign Gears. So this is a snapshot you may have seen on our social media, giving you a little glimpse of our of our 150 website. So I'm just going to give you a quick run through. So when you first go through the website, you'll see the new 150 logo, as well as the front page, which will feature the timeline. As you scroll downwards, there'll be a feature video. Right now, it's when we launch it on April 12th, there'll be the video looking at the history of Toronto York Region Labour Council. As you scroll down, there's going to be a snapshot of some of the stories highlighted on the website. And finally, at the bottom, we're going to have things like, events page, resources, music playlists, as well as highlighting some of our sponsors. And when you go into the website, there's going to be various sections. Resources will look at things downloadable. So, for education projects for your local or your affiliate, for educators, for students doing research, there's going to be a resources section of things that you can download and access. We're going to have a members section and a stories section as well. So the stories, pretty straightforward, 150 years of stories through various categories. And this is what the stories page is going to look like. If you click on the categories bar right here, it'll bring a drop-down menu, and there'll be various categories that you can choose from equity issues and a whole range of various issues. If you click on one of the actual stories, what you'll get is this will be the basic template for what the stories will look like. So we'll have a poll quote on the left-hand side and shareable buttons, photo, and then the post itself. And if you click on any of these right here, it will take you right down to the section that you're looking for. So this right here is a story about Rosa, and at the bottom, there'll be tags. So there'll be, all the different categories will be listed at the bottom. So you can continue the story. Let's say you're looking for something from your specific affiliate or your specific local, or something on a specific equity issue. There'll be tags at the bottom, so you can continue to look for more stories related to that. And the members section is going to be very similar. We'll be highlighting various member organizations, and I'll have a poll quote, the year it was founded, a story, including photos. And it's really important that we get as many photos as possible in these profiles. This right here is just a template placeholder, but it's going to be fully populated by April 12th. And, yeah, so we'll have, this is what the members page will look like, very similar to the stories page with some highlighted ones at the bottom, similar to resources. And in the resources section, like I said, we'll have lots of downloadable content, but also lots of educational videos, like the What Have Trade Unions Done for Us series of videos. We'll have music, lots of downloadable content, and And yeah, I just want to show folks a little bit of the back end, just to give you a snapshot. This is the new WordPress backend format. Very, very straightforward to input all your stories into. So myself right now and Rochelle from Labor Council Services are taking on this work, but really, a lot of folks could take advantage of this in the future. So yeah, so you just, I'm just going to move on. It's pretty straightforward. You just put it in a photo and it gives you lots of straightforward options. Same thing with the writing. Very, very easy, straightforward format to upload our stuff. And here, giving you guys a bit of a snapshot of what we've been posting on our social media. And the reason for this is because one of the key features of the website is going to be an interactive timeline looking at various items from the past 150 years, which will not be live until after April 12th, but wanted to give you a bit of an example of some of the stuff that we'll be seeing on the timeline. So for example, 1886, founding of the Trades and Labor Congress of Canada. We'll have a bit of a blurb, possibly a photo, and then you can keep scrolling through over 150 years. That will be on the website, but right now we just have some snippets as a preview on our social media. We're also going to be doing hopefully 150 profiles of courage of various labor activists over the next 12 months. These are just little templates of the former president or former executive director of my union, TMA Local 49. So this is what the profiles of courage will look like. And we'll also be doing, poll quotes for the website and for social media. Here's one from John Hewitt Cooper, the first president of Labor Council, and another one from the female boot and shoe worker on strike. Finally, a little bit more looking at some of the stuff we're going to be doing on social media. So just like we have the timeline, we'll be doing something a little bit more in depth on this day in labor history posts. So we'll be doing the poll quotes, the profiles of courage, timeline on this day. Yep. And also we're going to be doing some interactive stuff like we ask, you share. So, we're going to ask folks what their first experience was attending a union meeting or event, or we'll ask them, how they get new members involved. And we want you and your members to really participate on social media and really, ask and answer. And it's going to be part of a contest. So you'll be able to win some great prizes. And finally, one thing that we're really excited about is that we're going to be doing trivia questions. So I'm just going to do one sample trivia question, which is, in what year did the Good Jobs for All Summit bring together 1,000 participants demanding economic justice following the collapse of the financial markets? And then we'll give a hint as well on our social media. And the hint is that the Good Green Jobs for All conference took place in 2009. And I can't see the chat right now, but I'd love to see what your guesses were for the question. What year did the first Good Jobs for All Summit bring together 1,000 participants demanding economic justice following the collapse of the financial market? And so, yeah, so that's some of the stuff that we'll be doing on social media. We're going to be posting, we're posting about half a dozen posts promoting April 12th every day. And we're going to continue posting after April 12th to really highlight all the work that, us, our members, and our past members have been doing for Toronto, for York Region as part of Labor Council for the past 150 years. So when you see this, what is happening on April 12th, 2021, you will know that is going to be the launch of our year-long campaign to celebrate 150 years of Labor Council. And in terms of the launch itself, it's going to feature a proclamation from Mayor John Tory on Monday, April 12th, as well as a media event. Hopefully a media event, depending how things go. But right now we're planning and hoping to bring folks out at 9:15 on Monday, April 12th to do a media event during the day and a proclamation that includes a flag raising at City Hall. And then we will be launching a live event that you can find on our website, on our Labor Council events website. At 7 p.m. we'll be doing a live event on YouTube and Facebook Live. They'll be featuring a brand new video from our videographer, Nadine McKinnon. And I think right now we're just going to play a little preview of Nadine's video. Come gather around, people. Oh, technical difficulties. Come gather around, people, wherever you roam, and admit that the waters around you have grown, and accept it soon. You'll be drenched to the bone. If your time to you is worth
The year 2021 marks the 150th anniversary of the Toronto and York Region Labour Council. For a century and a half, working people have organized collectively around a vision of economic and social justice. It's been a remarkable journey, and the lessons from our past provide a guide for anyone working for a more just society today and tomorrow. We are in the dish with one spoon territory. Our story began on the land of Indigenous communities and has been forged with those who have come from around the world as immigrants or refugees to build Canada's largest urban centre. 150 years ago, a small group of trade unionists came together to give life to an idea: the creation of a collective voice for working people in Toronto.
So yeah, so that is a preview of what you can look forward to on April 12th, and we hope that everybody is able to join us.
And now you're trying to get rid of your screen.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, like I was saying, it's going to be very exciting. There's going to be stuff happening all day long, but also every day leading up. And then after April 12th, will be a whole year of celebration and education. And when folks see the website, you're going to be blown away. The whole team, Labour Community Services, York Region Labour Council, and especially campaign gears have been doing an amazing job. And we can't wait for you to see the website on April 12th. And please get your stories in, including photos, because they will really make a big difference. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Mohammed. And for those who may have seen Mohammed at different rallies or even day of mourning events in the past, he is a hip hop artist. It goes by the nickname of the socialist vocalist. And he's taken over this social media work and really helping with the whole team. And Craig Heron, Frank Septel from the Workers' History Project, and so many others have been helping guide this work. And on the 12th of April, you'll all see ads on buses, on bus shelters, on digital billboards in York Region. Please take a look. We're going to do some contests for people to identify those ads. And you're going to see, as I mentioned before, the picture of that young boy who came as a refugee himself with his mother from Colombia, part of the kind of work that we are going to continue. So part of our biggest fights right now is taking on this provincial government and their refusal to provide paid sick leave. Rayanne from Local 905, Keep It Local 905, is going to talk a little bit about the ZAP on World Health Day. And I think somebody else is going to follow her. Rayanne, are you on the line?
Yes. Hi, everybody. Okay. Hi. So like John said, on April 7th, it's World Health Day, and we are hosting a phone zap to target especially Conservative MPPs, but all MPPs to be voting in paid sick days. I know there's a bill 274, I believe, which is coming up, which would provide 10 employer paid sick days. There was a bill just a few weeks ago voted down. Conservatives voted across the board no to paid sick days for workers. So on April 7th, we want to gather. This came out of a beautiful idea from the York Region Steering Committee that meets every month. And so this is the event we're going to come together, talk a little bit about why paid sick days are important. And we're partnering with Workers Action Center and the Decent Work and Health Network. So I can share a Facebook link in the chat, and I hope to see you all there April 7th at 7 p.m.
Great, thank you. And I may have missed something, but I'm trying to, we've got a second more. Susan, do you want to mention what it is?
Sure, yeah. So first of all, pay special attention to that phone zap, and please, as many of you as can participate in it would be great. I'm going to take us back to the 150 for a minute. I have a 4-question quiz for you. So we're just going to do this using the polling function, which means people on the phones won't be able to participate in it. But here we go. Here's our first question. And it is, when did Toronto's labor movement first support equal pay for women? And there's 4 choices: 1882, 1915, 1948, 1982. And of course, these quizzes are as much about education as they are about testing your knowledge, although sometimes you've been given a hint about these in an earlier presentation. Just give another minute for people to vote there. Okay, the voting is slowing down, so I'll end the polling now and share what the results are. So the highest number voted for 1882, and that's right. That's the shoe fitter strike, the first strike by women that we know of in the Toronto area, supported by the labor movement, and they were out on strike for equal pay for women doing the same work. And of course, we've continued to support that fight. Second question. What organization did labor help establish in 1975 in response to anti-Asian racism? So there's 4 choices there: Chinese Workers Network, Urban Alliance on Race Relations, the Asian Canadian Labor Alliance, and the Chinese Canadian National Council. Which of those did labor help establish in 1975 in response to anti-Asian racism? Give you another 30 seconds or so to think about that question. All right, so we'll close the voting, share the results. And you know, it's pretty easy to imagine that people might think that labor had played a role in each of these organizations. The right answer is the Urban Alliance on Race Relations, established in 1975. Of course, the Labor Council helped to establish the Chinese Workers Network more recently. And, you know, it's been doing great work with the leadership of Kingsley and Jennifer and Ling. And the other organizations are wonderful allies, and we work in partnership with them. The third question. Which of the following did unions help establish? And you'll see there's a bit of a health and safety theme here. The National Day of Mourning on April 28th to remember those who've been hurt or lost their lives at work. National and provincial public health insurance. The Industrial Safety Act of 1964, or all of the above. All right, we'll end the suspense on this one. And so absolutely, labor has been involved with each of these. The CLC helped to launch the Day of Mourning. Unions and labor organizations across the country have been responsible for really pushing for public health insurance. And the Industrial Safety Act of 1964 came about as a result of the horrible Hogs Hollow tragedy or disaster when 5 young Italian immigrants lost their lives in a fire in a cave-in. A fire up at where the Hogs Hollow, where the York Mill subway station is these days. You can take a look at the quilt that's in the York Mill subway station commemorating that if you're up there someday. And the last question is, what was the first name of our Labor Council? Toronto and York Region Labor Council, Toronto and District Labor Council, Toronto Trades Assembly, or Toronto Trades and Labor Council?
Susan, that quiz
I
is
haven't
not up
watched
yet.
it yet.
Okay.
There we are.
Who's doing that?
There's the results. And the majority has it. It's the Toronto Trades Assembly. And of course, there's an interesting history about the transition of those names, because unions started as trade unions. And it was in the 1930s, the Labor Council wanted to push in the direction of industrial organizing earlier than that. But the push really began in the 1930s. And so we became the Trades and Labor Council. Then we expanded the area, became the Toronto District Labor Council. And now we're really happy to have our sisters and brothers from York Region, along with sisters and brothers from Toronto.
Great, thank you very much, Susan. So before we go to reports, we have one more item. Back at the start of the year, I gave a strong hint that I was going to be retiring before this summer comes. It was 19 years ago in last November that I was elected as president of this Labor Council. And it's now time for me to step back and for us to have new leadership in this Labor Council. So this is the formal nomination that in the month of May, there will be opening up for nomination for the president of the Toronto and York Region Labor Council. In our bylaws, there's a couple of things that have to happen. You have to be obviously a delegate to this Labor Council. Your union has to be in good standing. And you have to have attended for the top officer roles at least half of the meetings in this last year. And so those are the requirements. May will be the nomination month, and election will take place in June. The notice has gone out to all of your local unions in the mail. That's what Maureen was doing at 7 o'clock this morning to remind them to update their delegate credential forms. So we have an accurate count of who the delegates are and their information. We've had a good discussion about balloting. It's quite likely that there would be electronic balloting in the case of election. A number of our unions have done that, but we haven't landed on that yet. This is just the notice that nominations will take place at the May delegates meeting. I'm going to say a little bit more about all of this at the end of this meeting, but then I'm going to now move to reports, starting with the CLC report and following with council, committee and union reports, and then we'll close with some music. So the CLC, Heather.
Thank you so much, Sean. And I know I speak for everyone here when we say there's no words that can really capture how much you have done for the labor movement in Toronto, but all across Canada. So just a deep thank you for everything that you've done, John. And I know that there's going to be a lot of fun events coming up in order to celebrate everything you've contributed. And just wanted to say a deep thank you, but more to come as those nomination meetings come in. Mm-hmm. And wanted to lead into the day of mourning. So the CLC has let out what our theme will be, which is the human cost of COVID-19 with a focus on frontline workers. So labor councils will be receiving all of the pertinent information as far as an action toolkit for that. But just for everybody else's records, it is the human cost of COVID-19. And also wanted to bring your attention to the fact that the Labour College of Canada has now opened applications for this year, with the deadline being April 25th. So I will put the link in for everything that I'm about to say, so everyone can get plugged into that. In the last CLC report, I spoke briefly about Laurentian University. I have a very brief update about that. We have seen a lot of new traction happening in the media, but Laurentian is currently in insolvency CCAA legal proceedings due to the steady erosion of public dollars towards post-secondary institutions. I'm very thrilled to say that the CLC with OCUFA, with LUFA, with OFL and Northern Labor Councils have been fighting this on the ground, and more to come as far as a province-wide effort. But I'm going to point you to some direction as far as how you can get involved here in Toronto, because there are massive implications for public services all across the board in Ontario with what's unfolding. What will have gone out in, I'm sure many of you have heard that we are on the brink of a potential federal election. Of course, there's no guarantees, but it is looking like after the budget, it could be the stepping stone towards a federal election. So the CLC has launched a series of digital organizing for elections. The first one was with Zane Velji. He's an organizer and digital strategist, digital architect in Alberta. Heard tremendous feedback from that. I personally got a lot out of it. I really hope that everyone here on this call will come to future events, because specifically in a pandemic, everything that we can be doing to be relevant in our efforts and how we're communicating to people digitally will be of utmost importance in this election. So I do hope that you tune in. There's another one happening this upcoming Tuesday next week. So after the long weekend, I hope that you're able to participate in that, and it will well be worth your time, 100%. On a statement kind of level, the CLC and Canada's unions are pleased to see that the federal carbon tax has been upheld by the Supreme Court. The Ontario government spent far too much money on trying to defeat that, money that could have been well spent helping people during the pandemic. And the CLC has joined forces with all federations of labor across Canada to protect the rights of gig economy workers. And I will share the statement on that and what we're pressing for governments across Canada to protect gig economy workers, specifically in the pandemic, but moving forward. And lastly, I wanted to highlight that we are in the final stages of a pilot program online for domestic violence and how we can address it in the workplace in a pandemic. So I'm very, very happy to hear that, considering how much domestic violence has been on the rise during the pandemic, and that will be available for people in the very near future, and how you can help support your community members when it comes to domestic violence. So that's it for me, and thank you so much, John, and to all of you.
Thank you, Heather. Are there any committees to report? And after committees, we're going to reports of local unions. And I'm looking to see if there's hands up. Laura Thompson, then Ralph Chatur from the Equity Committee. Laura, from Women's Committee.
Hi, Laura Thompson, OPSU Local 503, pronouns she, her. Reporting the Women's Committee. So we are looking to, sort of a save the date announcement. We are looking to do a session, Sisters Roundtable, specifically a self-care social, dedicated to kind of having a conversation around what are the things that have grounded us over the last year and that we find care and self-care in, and also to give folks some skills in terms of things that can ground them going forward. And as well, just some fun, some games, and a chance to kind of better know different activists. So we are hoping to have this, so tentatively we're looking at May 20th at 7 p.m. So we do ask that you please save the date, and we'll have more details on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ralph from the Equity Committee?
Yes.
We're going to reports of locals. Go ahead.
Yes. Good evening, brothers and sisters. Ralph Chatter from the Society of United Professionals. The IWOC, Indigenous and Workers of Color Conference, will be taking place on June 12th. We have 4 interesting workshops in environmental racism, migrant workers, and the impact due to COVID-19, land acknowledgements, and challenging racism and racial trauma. We also like to say that we have thank you to all of you for we received a generous amount of nominations for the Bromley Armstrong Awards. We're in the process of going through those, selecting the winners, and that will culminate in a May 26 award ceremony. Excuse me. We discussed East Asian attacks, and we intend to negate hate with love and profile the achievements of many East Asians in the month of May. So stay tuned. John?
Thanks, Ralph. We're going now to reports of local unions, and first up is Miles.
Hi, Miles Magner, OPSU 568. I just wanted to give a quick report on the work that some locals and our area council in OPSU Region 5, that's the Toronto region, have been doing around the crisis of evictions, pending evictions, and homelessness during the COVID pandemic. As folks may be aware, Labor Council passed a really good statement on exactly this issue. I think it was in November of last year, recognizing that with the impact on jobs, the mass layoffs, loss of hours for precarious workers, et cetera, that there are thousands and thousands of our sisters and brothers and other members of the community who are behind in their rent, The provincial Tories passed Bill 184, which gives really tips the scales in the favor of landlords in terms of forcing tenants to accept unrealistic repayment terms and then applying for an expedited eviction because they couldn't meet those terms. And we're living this crisis right now. There was a temporary freeze on actual enforcement of those eviction notices during the phase 2 stay-at-home order, which ended in March. And the Ministry of Attorney General Sheriff's Office is now gearing up to start enforcing a backlog of thousands and thousands of eviction orders. It's worth noting that the Landlord Tenant Board didn't shut down during the crisis, during the wave 2 stay-at-home order, and continued conducting thousands of online eviction hearings per week. So there's a number of groups that have been doing some really creative organizing, helping tenants set up their own tenant unions to try to force their landlords to negotiate on actually achievable terms for rent relief and rent repayment. Needless to say, the corporate landlords make up about 95% of the rental market in Toronto are not so keen on that. And there's been some really creative tactics that folks have been taking for online action, mass attendance at some of these landlord tenant board hearing meetings, and for actions to prevent evictions, physical actions, masked, socially distanced, et cetera, to support tenant organizing and prevent evictions. There's one new development in Parkdale that folks may have heard about, which is that Starlight Investments, which is Canada's largest residential landlord, has sought a different kind of eviction notice against tenants at one of the big buildings in Parkdale at 55 Triller, not for non-payment of rent, but for having the nerve to try to organize a union with their neighbors, and have applied for eviction notices or have issued eviction notices against these folks for breaking the law to do so, which is of course appalling. That's in landlord tenant world, that's the equivalent of union busting. And they are also taking action to evict some members from that building, some tenants from that building for non-payment of arrears. There was a great rally last Saturday in Parkdale, several hundred people out. I know Brother Nigel from ETT was there. Some other OPSU members were there. Barb Kanabi from Local 553, members of her local were there. And it was a very powerful march through Parkdale, where other folks were coming out of other Starlight buildings and saying, yeah, that's exactly the crazy stuff that's going on in our buildings too. There's a follow-up action because one of these tenants at 55 Triller has an eviction hearing next
Miles,
week.
I'm going to ask you to kind of wrap up on the follow-up action, please.
Yeah, that's exactly where I'm planning to wrap up, John. You anticipated me exactly. And so the details of that event are, it's called by Parkdale Organized, but other tenants organizations will be there. It's this Saturday at 12 p.m. meeting at 1639 Bathurst Street, that's north of St. Clair. And there's going to be a march up to leaflet outside of a whole number of other Starlight buildings along the Bathurst Street strip heading north to try to build the campaign to force this atrocious landlord to negotiate rather than evict. And I hope to see folks there. I'm going to share the last thing I will say is we got to really
you've wrapped up, Miles. We're trying, there's 5 other speakers, please. If you could put it on the chat, it would be great.
Okay, I'll share that information. Thank you.
Thanks. Jenny, followed by David, Kidd, then Jack Humphrey, then Rayanne, then Kim.
Thank you so much, Miles, for speaking to the need to fight evictions and stand with tenants in this time. It's, I always say, housing and homelessness are working class issues. And it'd be great to see more and more of our labor movement take this on. So huge solidarity and thank you so much. So I'm here actually with members of my union of Workers United Local 154, and we're here to talk about a health and safety solidarity campaign. We are literally in the fight for our lives right now. We've had multiple outbreaks. We work for a large social service agency in the East End, and we actually united an entire housing and homelessness department around our health and safety concerns. I actually have a member here tonight that if it's okay with the council, she's a young, fierce, up-and-coming warrior in our labor movement, and I want you to hear from one of my members. She'll be quick, but I think it's really important that we do hear. And I also want to share, she'll talk about what our issues are, how you can support us. We've gotten lots of wonderful support from the ATU, OPSU. We've gotten over 100 letters, asking our management to do the right thing for these workers to help prevent illness and deaths in our workplaces, as well as to protect our clients. So Emily, I'll pass it to you to say a few words.
Emily?
Thank you. Hi, sisters, brothers, comrades. Thank you for giving me a moment to speak here. So my name is Emily. I'm a community housing worker at a large social service agency represented by Workers United Canada Council Local 154. I'm also a member of Labour Fight Back, and I'm one of the grievers that Jenny spoke so kindly of a moment ago. Throughout this pandemic, we've had to fight our employer tooth and nail for every minor health and safety precaution. In the first wave, we were granted, after some advocacy, the option to work from home once a week. This was rescinded with no notice and no explanation in early August when case counts were lower. When we saw the cases climbing in late fall, we tried to have a conversation with upper management. We were told that we would not be reevaluating work from home. In January, with the declaration of the second state of emergency, we tried again, but this time they refused to even talk to us about it. So we wrote a letter as a housing team, to which we received no response, at which point we filed a grievance, which finally got a response. So we're now in the midst of an expedited arbitration. As Jenny said, this is a struggle for our health and safety as frontline social service workers and for that of our clients as well. But this campaign is not just about remote work. It is about health and safety, but it's also about dignity and respect for ourselves and for our colleagues on the front lines, maintenance, cleaners, personal support workers, childcare staff, and many more who show up every day for our clients and communities. We've been called heroes by the employer more times than I care to count, and every time it leaves a sour taste in my mouth. They call us heroes over and over again and thank us profusely for everything we do, but it never goes beyond empty words. And when we've expressed concern over our health and safety, we've been shut down again and again. For months, the employer has tried to pit us against our colleagues in building services and assisted living, but I'm proud to say that this has not worked. From the very beginning, this campaign has included all frontline staff. We recently did a protest that over 50 people attended, socially distant and masked, of course, which also put forward the demand for pandemic pay for all frontline workers, and at which I was honored to have the opportunity to speak and deliver a solidarity message to the locked out Molson workers of CUBGW 325. As we've proven throughout this campaign, the struggle for workers' rights is not confined to just one job description, one department, one employer, or one local. We've received solidarity for our campaign from across the labor movement, from the ATU to OPSU, and from dozens of our comrades as individuals. I'm asking you, on behalf of my co-grievers, to please take a moment tonight to submit a letter. Jenny has put a template in the chat. Your solidarity means so much to us and has greatly boosted our morale as we go through this difficult process. So thank you once again.
Thanks, Emily. Next, we have David Kidd, followed by Jack Humphrey. David.
Thanks, John. I'm David Kidd, QP79 with the Toronto Workers' History Project. And we often are sponsoring events these days to provide inspiration and hope from our proud history during tough times that we've heard a little bit about tonight. Along with Labor Council, a number of our participants are participating on the 150th anniversary of Labor Council, and we're proud to be a part of that. But I just wanted to at least alert people to two important events coming up. On April 13th, the day after the Labor Council launch, we are doing an event, Unions Against Apartheid. And this was the work of unions in Canada to support the struggle against apartheid in South Africa in the 1980s. It was a very strong movement made a difference, and there will be a number of speakers from that event that will both be on a Zoom feed and a Facebook feed. And on May 11th, we are doing an event that coincides roughly with the 150th anniversary. That is, this is the 50th anniversary of the Royal York Hotel strike of Unite Here back in 1961. It was a milestone moment in our city's history. It also is a reflection on some of the difficult struggles that Unite Here is going through during this pandemic. So we will present both some history and both give some inspiration to the ongoing fight of the members of that proud union. Thank you, John.
Thanks, David, and thank you everybody involved in the Toronto Workers' History Project. It really is so crucial that we have a group of people that care enough. They're putting their time and their energy into this to remind us of the lessons that we can take from our struggles of the past and how they can inform what we're doing in the future. Jack Humphrey, followed by Rayanne and Kim Nesselo. Jack.
Hi, sisters, brothers, and comrades. I'm Jack Humphrey. I think this is the first meeting I've attended. I'm with QP 3904 and Labor Fight Back. I just wanted to plug the Labor Mayday Committee's Mayday Rally happening on May 1st at 1 p.m. It's been sponsored by many trade unions, and we're holding the rally this year under three major slogans or demands: workers of the world and oppressed people unite, no bailouts for the bosses, and nationalize the pandemic profiteers, as well as fight capitalism and fight for socialism. We're going to be having speakers from the labor movement, socialist organizations, and representatives from the NDP. If last year is any indication, we had thousands watching the live stream and hundreds participating in our Zoom webinar. And we're hoping on some sort of small miracle that the current sort of public health conditions get better so that we're able to have it in person. But if not, the rally will still be taking place and be taking place online over Zoom. So I'd encourage all to come out, and thanks for your time.
Thanks. Rayanne, followed by Kim.
Hi, Rayanne Lees, Vice President of QP 905. We're municipal and library workers in York Region, and I wanted to share a campaign we're working on for the Markham library workers. So all municipal libraries across Ontario have been able to offer safe curbside services and some amazing online programming, continuing library service during this pandemic when workers and their families need it more than ever. But unfortunately in Markham, they have 5 out of 8 libraries closed and 200 out of 250 staff laid off. It's over a year now since they've been shown the door from work, and while most other libraries across the province and country have been recalled to work, Markham is gapping in library services and failing to provide that. So I'm going to share a website and petition with you. I'm hoping you can all share and sign it, especially if you live, work, or have kids that go to school in Markham. We really need these counselors to know that library services are a priority. Thank you.
Thanks. Kim Nesselo. Kim,
Yep. Sorry, I had to unmute myself. Hi, Kim Nesselo, local president for 5111 of Elbed. Just to let everyone know that our contract had ended yesterday, and we are now in the bargaining process. Which is Elbed, which is LCBO.
Great, thanks, Kim. And by the way, folks, on the 12th of April, when you go to the labor150.ca website, one of the things you're going to be able to do is see this product called The Workers' City, done by historian Craig Heron, and it includes a story of folks who were part of the OPSEU Civil Service Association and trying to craft a union, and the liquor board employees are now part of OPSEU. So there's going to be lots of interesting stories for you to read at labor150.ca. Please join us on the 12th at 7 p.m. We'll be sending out all the social media information. Please spread that to all of your members. Okay, we want to actually see hundreds, if not thousands, of people enjoying the kind of quality of video that you've seen, the presentations. Some of our allied organizations will be speaking a bit about the work we do. There's going to be some time for speeches later on when I do step back formally from this role, but I want to say right now how grateful I've been to the amazing staff that I've been able to work with in this Labour Council over these years. To not just the Labour Council, but also the leadership of our projects, the Labour Education Centre, Labour Community Services. The executive board that we have around this table, and we haven't been physically around the table, the boardroom table at 15 Gervais for over a year. But the leaders around that table are really some of the best thinkers and leaders in our movement, in fact. And collectively, this Labour Council has often broken ground for issues that the rest of the movement across the country realizes are important, as we've shown how those doors can be opened, how that journey can be taken. For you as the delegates, I mean, to have 80 something people on the night before a long weekend speaks to the commitment that you have, not just to attending meetings, but being part of building this movement, to being on the picket lines, to helping the campaigns, that make a difference. And if you go to that website, you'll see a timeline over 150 years. You just get a sense of some of the amazing campaigns that we've been involved in. And our affiliated unions, we have 144 local unions affiliated to this Labour Council, large and small. Some are in the tens of thousands and some are just a few dozen people, but each of them are important to us. And if your union hasn't yet sponsored the 150th anniversary, you still got time. We know we've got a number of unions that have stepped up and really, bring in some resources to this so we can do things well. But we'll be telling this story over a whole year. So if it hasn't come to your executive board, if it hasn't come to your membership yet, you can still support this work and add your union story into our website and into the work that we're trumpeting across all kinds of media, through print media, through radio, through TV, as again, you'll see the bus ads and the bus shelter ads and the digital ads starting on the 12th. I look back, this month, I'm 45-year member of my home local, Carpenters Local 27. I worked non-union for a few years, so I'm not telling you my age, but I'm working non-union for a few years, and then I was able to join Local 27. I've been 45 years a member at the end of this month. 38 years ago, I was elected as a rep with my home local union. And then a decade after that, I was elected as the manager of the building trades to represent all construction workers during those tough times. And I've looked back at the leadership in this Labour Council, people like Linda Torney, like Mike Lyons, Wally Majeski, who's a fellow construction worker, electrician, who really broke tremendous ground in creating those projects that we've heard from tonight that we talk about. We were a builder of affordable housing. The Labour Council Development Foundation built over 3,000 units of permanently affordable housing until Mike Harris pulled the trigger and killed all of those programs. And each generation of our activists needs to figure out union renewal. And this election will be about union renewal and hearing the vision that is needed for our council to be strong and leading and inclusive in the future. So I'm not going to go away. I'm probably going to be around the table with our Toronto Workers History Project folks. You're certainly going to see me helping out with the Canadian Labour International Film Festival that Frank Saptel and others have headed, because I think telling our stories through film, through presentations, through song is so important. I will be always supporting this Labour Council. It is so close to my heart. I have felt so fortunate to be part of that amazing 150-year journey. And you will be seeing us in actions in the next period of time, certainly on the 12th. Please join us that night. On April the 28th, our day of mourning, as we've said, we are going to do it this year with a special eye to the particular impact around communities of color and racialized workers, but also recognizing those who passed away in direct workplace accidents, through COVID that they've caught, or through other disease. We're doing one on York Region at 11 o'clock in the morning virtually, and in Toronto from the Chinese Railway Workers Monument virtually at noon on April the 28th. Mayday, there's going to be a big campaign the 15 and Fairness is putting on to go after MPPs and demand paid sick days. And then the Bromley Armstrong, as you'll see, is going to be the 26th of May, and all of your unions will be getting invitations to support the Bromley Armstrong event. I know they've got great recommendations that have been put in front of the Equity Committee to choose who's going to be the winner of the Bromley Armstrong Award this year, and it's going to be a really great day. So my friends, sisters, brothers, comrades, friends, look forward to the next stage of the journey. Look forward to April 12th as having a great day to celebrate an amazing legacy and history of our movement. And we know we're on the journey that's going to take us forward so that working people have the power to win economic, social, racial, and climate justice for generations to come. Thanks very much. We're going to hear the Raging Asian Women that were part of our Stewards Assembly just a little while ago to bring our thoughts together. So, Raging Asian Women, as we want to thank you all. Good night, all. We'll see you in the whirlwind.